Have you ever wondered if just one overlooked detail could change everything about your VA disability claim? Most veterans think their fate is sealed once the VA gives them a rating, as if every shred of evidence has been carefully weighed. But what if I told you the entire course of your life could swing on a single document, one forgotten page, buried in a file cabinet, or lost in a mountain of paperwork? Today, you're going to hear the story of a veteran who lived through years of pain and disappointment, stuck at 30%, just scraping by, all because the VA never bothered to review one critical record. He trusted the process. He trusted the system. He thought, if there was something important in my file, surely they would have seen it, right? He was wrong, and he's not alone. Because here's the truth: missing evidence, lost medical records, or a file that simply never makes it onto the right desk, these aren't rare glitches. They happen more than anyone wants to admit, and most people never even realize it. But in this case, what happened next was almost unbelievable. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn could be the difference between a lifetime of frustration and finally getting the benefits you truly deserve. And as you watch, ask yourself, could there be something hiding in your own file right now that the VA simply forgot to see? Let's find out. It started the same way it does for so many veterans, an injury that changed everything. For John, it was a back injury during his second deployment, the kind of pain that never really lets up. At first, he tried to tough it out, pushing through the discomfort, because that's what he'd always done. But after months of restless nights, doctor visits, and prescriptions that barely took the edge off, it became clear this wasn't something he could just shake off. When John finally left the service, he brought home more than a duffel bag full of memories. The pain was now part of daily life, and it followed him into every room, every job interview, every moment he tried to enjoy with his family. Like many vets, John was encouraged to file a disability claim. Get what you deserve, his friends told him. You earned it. So he gathered his records, listed his symptoms, and walked into that first VA appointment with a mixture of hope and nerves. But from the very beginning, the process was anything but simple. John's paperwork bounced from office to office. Some records made it into his file. Others seemed to vanish in the shuffle. The rating decision finally arrived, a modest 30%. Not nearly enough to cover the cost of his treatments or the time he missed from work, but he was told it was better than nothing. John tried to convince himself it would be enough. But deep down, something felt off. The pain was real, the struggle constant, and yet the VA seemed to treat his situation like just another routine claim. What he didn't know was that a crucial piece of his story, the very evidence that could have changed everything, was missing from the VA's review. And the consequences of that single oversight would soon become impossible to ignore. Most veterans assume that when they submit their paperwork, every medical record and supporting document automatically lands in front of the person making the decision. But John quickly discovered the reality is much messier. Medical records get lost, files are misfiled, and the people reviewing claims aren't always searching as hard as you'd hope. Even the tiniest oversight, a missing MRI scan, an unfiled doctor's note, a single piece of paper stuck in the wrong folder, can mean the difference between a fair rating and a lifetime of struggling to prove your pain. For John, it was a treatment summary from a civilian specialist, buried in a stack of unrelated documents. This single record described, in plain language, the full impact of his back injury on his day-to-day life. It explained how simple activities, bending, lifting, even sitting for more than an hour, were now impossible without pain. But when the VA did their initial review, this vital note never made it into the decision process. It wasn't flagged, it wasn't read, it simply sat ignored in the depths of his file. If you think this kind of thing doesn't happen, think again. Across the country, thousands of vets have stories about records being overlooked or brushed aside. Sometimes it's because the files arrive late. Sometimes they're never properly uploaded. Sometimes, in the rush to move cases along, important details get skipped over entirely. It's a system built for speed, not accuracy, and veterans like John are often the ones left paying the price. But missing a single record wasn't just a paperwork error, it was the moment that set everything else in motion. And as John would soon learn, getting the truth recognized meant challenging a process that too often relies on convenience over careful attention. The fight for the rating he actually deserved was just getting started. After John received his initial decision from the VA, the number staring back at him felt like a slap in the face. 30%. It didn't even come close to reflecting the pain he endured every single day. The letter he got was filled with generic language, phrases like "not enough evidence" and "symptoms do not warrant a higher rating." John read it over and over, searching for any hint of what they had missed. Deep down, he knew there was more in his file than what the rating specialist had considered. But unless he figured out exactly what had gone wrong, he'd be stuck with less support, fewer resources, and a feeling of being dismissed by the very system built to protect him. That's when John decided to dig deeper. Instead of accepting the VA's answer, he requested a complete copy of his C file, a massive collection of every record, exam, and note the VA used or ignored when making his decision. This is where most veterans stop, either too overwhelmed by the paperwork or too discouraged to push further. But John refused to give up. Night after night, he pored over every page, hunting for something the VA had overlooked. It didn't take long before something odd caught his attention. The civilian doctor's summary he had painstakingly submitted, the one that described in detail how his injury left him unable to work, was nowhere in the evidence considered section of his denial letter. It was as if it never existed. That's when it hit him. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a missed lifeline, the single record that could change everything. John realized he'd have to do more than just point out a missing document. He needed to prove, beyond any doubt, that this single note had the power to transform his entire case. And as he started building his argument, he uncovered something even more frustrating. This wasn't a rare fluke. It was a pattern that quietly undermined veterans across the country, robbing them of the ratings and resources they rightfully earned. The next step would push John into a fight, not just for himself, but for every veteran caught in the same broken process. John's first move was to anchor his case with unmistakable proof, so he scheduled an appointment with the same civilian specialist who'd written the missing report. This time, he asked the doctor to go a step further, to create a nexus letter that left zero wiggle room. The physician didn't just state that John's combat-related injury could be causing his chronic pain. He declared it at least as likely as not, the exact legal phrasing the VA cannot ignore. He tied every MRI image, surgical note, and physical therapy log to the precise paragraph in the VA's own rating schedule that called for a 100% evaluation. When the letter was finished, John didn't simply upload it into the void and hope for the best. He mailed it certified, faxed a copy to the Evidence Intake Center, and hand-delivered another to his local VA office, demanding a receipt. Now the record the VA had missed was stamped, time-stamped, and impossible to overlook. But John knew documentation alone wasn't enough. He had to choose the right lane in the new appeals modernization system. He bypassed the higher-level review, where the same evidence often gets the same result, and filed a supplemental claim, backed by his fresh Nexus letter. Then he did something most vets never think to do. He wrote a concise 2-page statement in support of claim that walked the rater through his file step by step. He highlighted the page numbers of every service treatment entry showing the original injury, listed each civilian medical record, proving continuity of symptoms, and capped it off with the doctor's hard-hitting opinion. By spelling it out line by line, he eliminated any excuse for another evidence-not-reviewed mistake. 30 days later, he called the VA's toll-free number to confirm the records were scanned in. They were, but only because his certified mail receipt gave him leverage. 60 days after that, the VA's automated system updated, decision letter pending. John's heart pounded, but he didn't celebrate yet. He sent a final follow-up email to the evidence team, politely reminding them that federal law requires the VA to consider every pertinent document, and that omitting the nexus letter would violate 38 U.S.C. Paragraph 5103A. If anyone had been tempted to skim past it, that email slammed the door shut. Now the rater had one path forward: acknowledge the oversight, apply the rating schedule correctly, and prepare to rewrite John's future. 3 weeks later, a thick white envelope hit John's mailbox, the kind that makes every veteran's pulse spike. He tore it open on the spot. Page 1. We have reviewed the evidence you submitted. We have granted service connection at 100%. His knees nearly buckled. The letter cited the very nexus. Paragraph his doctor had bolded, quoted the "at least as likely as not" language verbatim, and referenced the page numbers John had highlighted in his statement. It was all there, proof the VA finally saw what had been sitting in his file the whole time. The impact was immediate. Overnight, his monthly compensation jumped from roughly $500 to more than $3,600. The retroactive award, calculated from the date he first filed 3 years earlier, topped $60,000, tax-free. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was validation. The VA's decision expressly acknowledged prior adjudicative error due to an overlooked medical record, language that all but guaranteed no future reviewer could claw his rating back. John's win also unlocked a cascade of benefits he hadn't dared plan for. Champ VA health coverage for his wife, federal hiring preference for his son, and property tax. Relief from his state. Every one of those doors swung open because a single doctor's note was finally placed in front of the right pair of eyes. Yet what amazed John most wasn't how quickly the dominoes fell once the record surfaced. It was how close he'd come to giving up before he ever found it. His story proves that a missing page can cost a veteran years of peace, and that forcing the VA to read that page can transform an entire family's future. But how do you know if your own file is missing a silent deal breaker, and where do you start hunting if the VA keeps telling you everything's already been considered? That's what we'll tackle next. John's first move after the win was a quiet promise. No veteran he knew would ever wait 3 years for a lost page again. He began sharing the exact playbook that forced the VA to crack open his file, and it starts long before you ever hit submit. First, order your entire C file, not a summary, not the rating sheet, the whole thing. Every progress note, exam, and deployment log gets bundled into one fat envelope. Second, sit down with a highlighter and sticky notes. Audit that monster stack line by line, hunting for any doctor's note, hospital summary, or service record that uses one of 3 magic phrases. At least as likely as not, aggravated by service, or chronic and continuous. When you spot one, flag it. Photocopy the page, highlight the sentence, and staple that copy to the front of a supplemental claim or higher-level review request. John even wrote, "Key evidence, see highlighted sentence," in red across the top, daring a reviewer to pretend it wasn't there. Next, craft a 1-page personal statement that ties each exhibit to the regulation in plain English. 38 CFR CAR 3303 requires a current disability and DSITE in-service event and a nexus. Exhibit A proves all 3. Keep it short. Make it impossible to misunderstand. Finally, track your claim every week on va.gov. If the status stagnates, call the 800 number and ask one pointed question. Which evidence has the reviewer opened so far? That polite nudge often forces a rater to click the very document they've been ignoring. John's strategy isn't slick legal jargon or pricey representation. It's the bureaucratic equivalent of placing a blinking neon arrow over the sentence that will change your life. Up next, we'll show you how to spot a hidden time bomb in your file before it blows up your rating. John's last discovery came after his rating jumped to 100%. Even a perfect win can crumble if you don't guard it. The VA reserves the right to call any veteran back for a re-examination, and a careless appointment can shave decades of benefits off your future. So he built a shield that starts the moment the award letter arrives. First, he requested his new C file the day the decision posted. That second copy shows exactly which evidence the rater relied on, and it locks the file in time. If a crucial record ever disappears, he can prove it once lived in the system. He filed the disk in a fireproof lockbox, then uploaded a backup to secure cloud storage. Second, he asked every treating physician to add an annual note that used the VA's own language. Condition remains static or has worsened. Those 5 words fend off most routine exam calls because they tell a reviewer there's no medical basis to expect improvement. Third, he kept a running symptoms journal, dates, flare-ups, medications, side effects, scanned monthly and emailed to himself. The time-stamped trail means he never has to rely on memory years later, if the VA questioned severity. Fourth, John joined an accredited VSO's mailing list and set calendar alerts for every regulatory change. When the VA updated the criteria for sleep apnea, he knew within 48 hours and filed a protective claim to secure an earlier effective date, just in case the inevitable reduction letter ever landed. Finally, he taught this entire routine to 3 battle buddies over coffee. One of them found a misfiled X-ray in his own record the very next day, evidence that bumped him from 50 to 70%. The point? Wins multiply when veterans share the playbook. Every breakthrough John made came down to one habit. He never assumed the VA had everything it needed. His buried field hospital note unlocked the leap from 30 to 100%. His follow-up evidence packs forced the earlier effective date, and his record-keeping shield now guards the award he fought for. If there's one lesson that echoes through his story, it's this: your claim lives or dies on the records you track, request, and protect. Audit your C file, keep duplicate proof, train your doctors to echo VA language, and file that request for a permanent and total designation before the window closes. Do that, and a single overlooked page could change the next 40 years of your life. We'd love to hear what you plan to check first. Drop a comment with the step you're taking today, or share the hurdles still holding you back. Your question might be the topic of our next video. If this breakdown helped, tap the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another strategy that could boost your benefits. Your support keeps these deep dive guides coming, and your stories in the comments fuel us to dig even harder. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.